Welcome to Traveling with Glenn, a series of bicycle touring adventures designed to educate, to entertain, and to inspire the viewer. I am your host, Glenn Davis. I began this adventure by flying from Bradley International Airport to JFK Airport, then to Keflavik, Iceland, and Luxembourg City, Luxembourg. We have reached the city of Cannes on the Mediterranean coast. Cannes is best known worldwide for its film festivals. The plaza seen here is named for Georges Pompidou, Prime Minister of France from 1962 to 1968 and President from 1969 to 1974. They have fun in the sun on the Côte d'Azur. This is a topless beach in Cannes. Perhaps a carousel ride is more to your liking. A view of Cannes from the observatory. Another town on the Côte d'Azur is Antibes, where I saw the 18th century Church of the Immaculate Conception. Nice is the fifth most populous city in France and the second largest French city on the Mediterranean coast. I met Hilary, an Australian woman, at the hostel in the evening. She began her bicycle trip having never ridden her fully laden bicycle or knowing how to shift gears until heading out onto a major highway in Portugal. Sometimes you have to learn fast. When her bike suffered its initial flat, Hilary got out her book and took a crash course on how to remove a wheel, tire, and repair a puncture. Hilary and I spent the next morning at an open-air market. For the past month, her lunches have consisted of banana sandwiches. And we also toured a museum. While at the market, when Hilary picked up a piece of fruit and put it back, the merchant promptly scolded her. In small European markets, you are expected to tell the shopkeeper what you want and allow the grocer to select the produce for you. Hilary is vivacious, strong-willed, and possesses a genuine zest for living life to the full. As I left, Hilary said, "I don't often get this feeling, but I have a hunch that we'll meet again." I hope she's right. The natural beauty of the French Riviera and mild Mediterranean climate became a favorite of the English upper class in the late 18th century when many aristocratic families vacationed here in winter. The Principality of Monaco is a city-state, country, and microstate on the French Riviera, surrounded by France and the Mediterranean Sea. I photographed this flower in Princess Antoinette Park. With a population of 38,400 and a land area of 0.78 square mile, Monaco is the second smallest and most densely populated sovereign state in the world. Its maximum height above sea level is 528 feet. The government of Monaco is a constitutional monarchy with Prince Albert II as head of state. The royal palace in the foreground was built as a Genoese fortress in 1191. Since 1297, the Rock of Monaco has been a stronghold of the Grimaldi family. The Palladian building in the background is the Oceanographic Museum, founded in 1906. Monaco received international attention on April 19, 1956, when Prince Rainier III married the American actress Grace Kelly in the Principality. After touring the French Riviera, I left the Côte d'Azur in early June and journeyed to several other countries to be seen in future episodes. I returned to France in early October and began touring the northern part of the country. In northeast France, a few miles west of the border with Belgium, I visited the small city of Bayeul, where I saw this beautiful clock tower. This thatched roof house is in the town of Europe2. Also in Europe2 is this mansion. We are in the Normandy city of Lisieux. The Basilica of Sainte Thérèse is one of the largest churches built in the 20th century. The devotion to Sainte Thérèse has made Lisieux the second most important pilgrimage site in France after Lourdes. I saw this old, half-timbered barn on the grounds of Coupe-Sart Manor. This grand chateau is in the town of Saint-Pierre. The ruins of a tower in the town of Tourneau. The impressive Chateau Pontécoulon. This attractive home is in Montsecret. And I saw this building in Tinchebray. Described as the Pyramid of the Seas and a fantastic manor exciting the fancy like a palace of dreams, Le Mont Saint-Michel, or St. Michael's Mount, is one of the greatest cultural landmarks in France. The mount is a massive granite outcropping 300 feet high and covering 247 acres. Located on a tidal island 6/10 of a mile off the coast of Normandy and linked to the mainland by an artificial causeway, the mount has been a place of Christian worship since the 5th century. A monastery was established in the 8th century. St. Michael's Mount exemplifies the feudal society that constructed it. On top, God, the abbey and monastery. Below, the great halls. Then stores and housing. And at the bottom, outside the ramparts, houses for fishermen and farmers. 500 feet above the sea is a bronze statue of St. Michael raising his sword to slay the dragon. By the 11th century, major reconstruction began as the Benedictine Abbey became a Norman stronghold. William the Conqueror set sail for England in 1066 from Normandy. The following year, the monastery of Mont Saint-Michel gave its support to William in his claim to the throne of England. During the 100 Years' War, the Kingdom of England made repeated assaults on the island, but was unable to seize it due to the abbey's improved fortifications. The 46-foot tides also served to repel or drown would-be assailants. Following the French Revolution, the abbey was converted into a prison to hold hundreds of clerical opponents of the regime, and later for high-profile political prisoners. By 1836, influential figures, including Victor Hugo, had launched a campaign to restore what was seen as a national architectural treasure. The prison closed in 1863 when the abbey was restored to its former glory. Today, more than 3 million people visit Le Mont Saint-Michel each year. We are now in Brittany, where we see the magnificent 13th century cathedral in the town of Dol de Bretagne. The cathedral is primarily Gothic with Norman and English influences. The bell tower is a 17th century addition. The beautiful stained glass panels are the originals. The cathedral was dedicated to Saint Sampson, a founder of Brittany. This is the town of Cancale, its harbor and fishing boats. On the coast of Brittany between Cancale and Saint-Malo. This picture of Saint-Malo was taken from the neighboring town of Saint-Servan-sur-Mer. The history of Saint-Malo dates back at least as far as the 1st century BC, when it was founded by Gauls. In time, it became a walled city. In late summer 1944, Allied bombing and shelling, in the mistaken notion that the Germans had a heavy military presence in Saint-Malo, all but destroyed the city. Saint-Malo was rebuilt from 1948 to 1960. The castle in Saint-Malo. Over the course of its long maritime history, the city became notorious as a home to corsairs, French privateers, and even pirates. This island fortress off the coast of Saint-Malo is called Fort National. I photographed this public building in Saint-Servan-sur-Mer. Just off the coast of Saint-Servan stands this fortress on a tidal island. While walking around it, I took several pictures. On my way back to town, it was necessary to remove my shoes and socks and to roll up my trousers in order to wade through the fast-rising tide. A portion of Germany's Atlantic Wall defense from World War II is shown in this picture. An anti-aircraft gun sits atop a bunker and part of the old city wall. Damage by Allied shelling is clearly visible. Also in Saint-Servan is the Tower of Solidor, built between 1369 and 1382. The tower houses a maritime museum with artifacts and stories of France's early maritime activity. The seafarer Jacques Cartier was born in neighboring Saint-Malo. A view of Saint-Servan with Saint-Malo in the distance. I photographed this railroad bridge and harbor in Port of Dinan. In the small city of Dinan is the Basilica of Saint-Sauveur. Homes and shops along a quiet cobblestone street. Also in Dinan is the Gothic Church of Saint-Malo. Ornamental spires called finials decorate the Church of Saint-Malo. The 111-foot-high Dinan Chateau, built in 1382 and 1383, is part of the 8,500-foot ramparts which still surround the old town. The 15th century Trisesson Chateau is privately owned by the Countess of Prunelle, who lives in the chateau. The town of Josselin was a stronghold of the House of Rohan. Built in the 11th century, Rohan Castle has been rebuilt at various times. Only 4 of the original 9 towers remain after Cardinal Richelieu ordered the castle partially destroyed in 1629. I stopped at the 16th century church of Guihenno and stained glass in the church. I biked the Quiberon Peninsula and camped in the village of Saint-Julien. The man who registered me was shocked to find an American cyclist at his campground. The French have the reputation of being rude to Americans, especially the ugly American who throws around lots of money and treats everyone like servants. I am learning that most French are very pleasant with me, especially when they find that I am bicycling. As soon as the man had checked me in, he ran to tell his wife of the American bicyclist who is touring Europe for 6 months. The next morning, I rode the ferry between the towns of Quiberon and Le Palais, a village on Belle-Île, the largest island in Brittany. I'm glad that I visited Belle-Île in mid-October because this is a very popular tourist area in summer. You are looking at the citadel in Le Palais. We see a view of Le Palais. Many residents of Belle-Île are descendants of repatriated Acadian colonists who returned to France after their expulsion from Nova Scotia during the great upheaval of the 7 Years' War. This 15.5-foot tall menhir, or monolith, was erected by an ancient civilization for ceremonial purposes. The lighthouse at Pointe des Poulins is 59 feet high and has been in service since 1868. Belle-Île has, for more than a century, been a favorite place of vacationers and artists, among them Claude Monet, who painted these rocks and several other scenes of Belle-Île in 1886. In La Roche-Bernard, founded by the Vikings in 919, we see an old fort, a modern highway suspension bridge spanning the Vilaine River, and the remains of the old bridge. We have reached the Loire Valley and the town of Champtoceau, where I photographed the gatehouse to the chateau. The Loire River, at 629 miles, is the longest in France. The chateau and vineyards near the town of Couture. Originally constructed as a castle in the 10th century to guard a strategic crossing point on the Loire River against Norman predations, Chateau Saumur was destroyed by the Normans in 1067, inherited by the English House of Plantagenet, and rebuilt by Henry II of England in the late 12th century. At a strategic point on the Indre River, Fulk Nerra, Lord of Anjou, built this fortress in 994 near the present-day town of Montbazon. Chateau Chenonceau, a jewel of the French Renaissance, is one of the grandest in a country of splendid chateaux. Built from 1514 to 1522 during the reign of Francis I in the late Gothic and early Renaissance style, Chateau Chenonceau spans the Cher River. The 65-yard-long gallery on the right side was built for Catherine de' Medici, Queen of Henry II. Chateau Chenonceau was bombed by both the Germans and the Allies during World War II. The Meunier family, who have owned Chenonceau since 1913, carried out extensive restoration work by 1951. A stately home in the town of Valère. The magnificent Chateau Chambord was, like Chateau Chenonceau, which we saw a minute ago, built during the reign of Francis I. It was built in the French Renaissance style. Chateau Chambord was never completed. The grand Chateau Les Gâchetiers in the tiny village of La Croix-Blanche. This church in Germany-des-Prés dates back to 806. It was restored in the 19th century. The chateau in Sully-sur-Loire had its origins in the 4th century as a medieval castle. The current chateau dates from the late 14th century and is a prime example of a fortress built at a strategic crossing of the Loire River. This grand chateau in La Motte-Tilly was built in 1754. The Republic of Italy is a unitary parliamentary republic. Its 61 million people live in an area slightly larger than the state of Arizona. After leaving France, the first Italian town that one arrives in is Ventimiglia, a port city on the Mediterranean coast. Located along the Gulf of Genoa on the Ligurian Sea, and the sixth most populous city in Italy with 600,000 residents, Genoa might have derived its name from the Latin word Genua, meaning door, for indeed many great explorers, including Christopher Columbus, seen in this statue, were born in or passed through Genoa. The port of Genoa is the busiest in Italy and on the Mediterranean Sea. Genoa has given birth to many famous navigators, including Columbus, Giovanni Caboto, better known as John Cabot, and Admiral Andrea Doria. One of Genoa's most notable landmarks is the 384-foot-tall Lanterna, one of the world's finest lighthouses. It was built on the site of an ancient tower in the first half of the 12th century. Genoa is home to many notable buildings, among them the Royal Palace, or Palazzo Reale, built from 1618 to 1655. Today, the palace houses a museum. Trina, a young woman from Seattle, and I met at the hostel and spent a rainy day touring museums. In general, Trina and I like Italy and its people, but the Italian men drive her crazy. Everywhere Trina goes, they pinch her fanny and make suggestive remarks such as, "You have hotel room key?" These row homes are typically Genoese. Another famous person born in Genoa was the composer and violinist Niccolo Paganini. There are many distinctive churches in Genoa. The Cathedral of San Lorenzo, consecrated in 1118, is an indication that two colors, black and white, have come to characterize Genoa. The white is marble, and the black is slate. The cloister of Sant'Andrea is part of the church founded in the 12th century and finished in the 17th century. Porta Soprana, circa 1150, is the best-known gate of Genoa's ancient city walls. Principe railway station was built in 1860. The Romanesque Santo Stefano, or St. Stephen's Church, was consecrated in 972 and completed in the 17th century. In the heart of the old city stands the Church of Jesus and Saints Ambrogio and Andrea, built from 1552 to 1598. This former castle, La Rocca Tirrena, is the youth hostel in Genoa where I stayed. As I walked my bike along Via Balbi, I heard a woman ask, "Are you American?" She had seen USA on my saddle. We chatted for a while, and soon the lady gave me her phone number and said to call if I'd like to have her show me around. How could I refuse an invitation like that? After some sightseeing on my own, I called Paula, who instructed me to meet her tomorrow morning at the statue of Columbus. We took the train to the suburb of Nervi. At the close of the war, Paula met an American serviceman with whom she spent 2 weeks before he returned home. 2 years later, Paula traveled to Wyoming, intending a short visit with her cowboy. But instead, they married. Following the death of her husband, Paula left Wyoming and settled in New York, where she had relatives in the clothing business. She studied design and became a dress designer for Pierre Cardin. Upon retirement, Paula returned to her family in Genoa after 40 years in the United States. Paula and I walked to the large complex of buildings in Nervi, hoping that we'd be allowed to tour the church. An elderly, distinguished gentleman greeted us and offered a guided tour, which he promised would be interesting. Paula and I got much more than expected. The man escorted us around a courtyard where several children played. It was the last day of school at Collegio Emiliani, a boarding school founded circa 1300 for the orphans of war dead. Our host took us through several beautifully appointed offices, the kitchen, dining hall, and onto a balcony overlooking the sea. Then, Paula and I were shown to the private apartment of our host, Cavaliere Luigi Spadoni, a handsome man of 75 who still sports a full head of white hair. A lifelong bachelor, Cavaliere Spadoni has been the caretaker at Collegio Emiliani since his retirement 15 years ago. Cavaliere is a title meaning knight or horseman. Before the war, Cavaliere Spadoni traveled with the King of Italy for 2 years aboard the royal train. Our host showed Paula and me precious keepsakes from an Arabian harem, including a mirror, a gold-trimmed bowl, and 2 fans. There were pieces of jade and a silver peacock from China, and a tapestry from India. After thanking our host, Paula and I looked around town before taking the train back to Genoa. Readjustment to life in Italy after so many years in the States has not been without some difficulty. Paula said with a degree of annoyance, "I don't know how the people here can stand to work for 4 hours, take 3 hours off, and work another 4 hours. It makes for a long day and lots of inconvenience for everyone." But this is minor when compared with the war years when she was a teen. Because of Genoa's strategic importance, it was heavily bombed. Paula went on to say, "My family and I suffered much hardship, including hunger. We often slept in the railroad tunnels because they were the safest places. Thousands of people were crammed into them. It was horrible." Back in Genoa, Paula and I kissed goodbye and promised to keep in touch. This ornate bell tower is in the village of Sori. Thank you for viewing Traveling with Glenn. Be sure to tune in to each and every adventure as we tour this fascinating world. Until then, I wish you bon voyage.